This was the first time I had seen a public leader in high office who brought her entire and highly obvious empathetic, optimistic and hopeful personality straight to the front from day one and use it as the very reason she belonged in leadership. I wanted to share with all of you what I've been thinking about since then. Would we really be human if we didn't have doubts and fears? They are helping you, encouraging you to critically think about your assumptions and perceptions. We don't define purpose, values and behaviours by what we claim to be bad or incapable of. Keep that faith in humanity, kindness and the potential for greatness in everyone around you. One of her biggest blockers as to why she might not be right for leadership was her empathy, but she later learned this was the very reason she was able to be useful. When we have empathy, purposeful change can happen if we choose to make it happen quickly. Those very qualities that people have been telling you all your life are not suited for leadership are the very qualities that connect us. Hey, welcome to the Leaders Podcast with me, Laura McDonald, the leadership coach and mentor. Come with me as I explore the elements of leadership that give leaders like you the power and confidence to make the impact you know you can. I'll be sharing my own experiences, top tips and insights, and talking to some very special guests to share their thoughts and leadership experiences on mindset, influence, change and growth. So let's get right to it. It's not personal, it's just business. Has anyone said this to you yet, or maybe implied it? You're not alone. I've heard this plenty of times and so have many of my colleagues. But I've got news for you. This isn't just business. Someone once explained to me a very important fact, that like it or not, in business, charity and every other area of life, we are all interdependent, and our actions, decisions and words all have an impact on somebody, even if we don't see it. I was incredibly fortunate last month to go to London to hear someone I've admired for many years now speak. I always say going to London is like seeing the whole world in a day, but this day was a little different to the hundreds of other days I've spent there. I could not have seen or heard more of the world in a day than I did on that Saturday. Something about it made me really reflect on how divided we can seem, with all the different colours, flags, music, languages, messages and so many other visible diversities around us. But also how united we can be, how united we are when we really think about it. The person I was in London to see was Jacinda Ardern, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, to hear about her new book and her views and experiences in leadership, what she learned, and how who she is helped her and everyone she was trying to serve. As I say all this, please be mindful that this is in no way a political episode, and I certainly don't know enough about New Zealand politics to know whether I would vote for her if I was a citizen. But I did leave that talk with one thing very firm in my mind. We need more empathy, optimism and hope from our leaders. Some out there may hear that message and think it's naive, it's unrealistic, it won't get us anywhere, and people with these more obvious natural traits will just be walked all over in leadership. That's the same message most of us get. You must be decisive, separate business from personal, and be at times a little cold-hearted. And you can't have any doubts or fears because God forbid anyone should see them, you'll lose instantly. Empathy, optimism and hope won't get you anywhere. But where are we without these things? Where are we without the ability to understand each other, to see the good, the potential and the best in each other? Where are we without hope? I believe these things are the keystone to impactful leadership, and that's why I went to hear Jacinda Ardern speak. She was a solid pillar of all the qualities in leadership I, and maybe you too, have been consistently told weren't a fit, and she was showcasing them on the global stage for all to see. I've heard lots of leaders speak on these kinds of leadership qualities, and they've embodied them for themselves, but often after hard lessons learned through trying to be the stereotypical win-at-all-costs leader, or through a terrible experience forced upon them by leaders who chose to cut empathy off altogether. They speak with experience on being that person that didn't align with who they are, or hiding the best parts of themselves and then transforming into a better version of leadership for all, and their contributions to the future of leadership are extremely valuable. but this was the first time I had seen a public leader in high office who brought her entire and highly obvious, empathetic, optimistic and hopeful personality straight to the front from day one and use it as the very reason she belonged in leadership. So I wanted to hear what she had to say. And today I wanted to share with all of you what I've been thinking about since then. Would we really be human if we didn't have doubts and fears? I've thought a lot recently about all the times I've doubted myself, worried what others think of me and how I've responded to that. I've always been quite proud of being unapologetically myself, but that doesn't mean it's always been easy or comfortable, and I'd be lying if I said I never make mistakes. I've made plenty, believe me, and I've questioned my own decisions more times than I can count. The way these thoughts make us feel means we really don't want them around a lot, if at all, but they offer distinct advantages that need acknowledgement because they support you a lot more than you think. The trick is to determine what your doubts are making you feel. We've all heard of that gut instinct that tells you when something feels really right or wrong, and you really do feel it in your gut. I can't speak for any of you, but when that happens to me, it's a very different feeling to the feeling I get when I'm simply questioning myself as a self-confidence issue, which is usually felt in my head and neck area. When doubts creep in, take note of where you're feeling it so you can work your way through and decide what to do. They are helping you, encouraging you to critically think about your assumptions and perceptions, so you seek more evidence to determine the facts that will help you make better choices. This is a natural built-in defense mechanism in our brains that helps us assess potential risks and keeps us safe. So letting those in at a healthy level is good for us. The more we exercise that critical thinking, control over our thoughts, and the choice to seek out evidence, the stronger our resilience becomes. Learning to manage it instead of letting it overwhelm us allows us to deal with what life throws at us better. Doubts and fears are also highlighting our areas for growth. For instance, a fear may hold us back from trying something, which highlights a personal limitation that we can then choose to recognise and overcome. And of course, there's those times where we look at something, tilt our head ever so slightly to the side and squint before saying, "That doesn't look right." In those moments, doubts are supporting you to recognise potential gaps or problems in plans or tasks that you can then work to understand and solve. And in many cases, particularly where you're challenging the norms, doubts are driving you to create and innovate, leading to new ideas you can explore. Of course we all have doubts and fears, of course we do. And if you want to serve yourself in the best way you can and be that lead example to others, you can choose to recognise all the ways these things help and support you to grow and share those advantages with your team. I'm not saying you have to showcase every doubt and fear you have with everyone, but you can strategically share what will help your team the most in achieving their personal and professional goals. There is one story I've heard over and over again from colleagues across all my roles, and that's the story of the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young apprentice or first-time employee, enthusiastic, optimistic, and hopeful for the future, who eventually becomes disillusioned, more skeptical, and accepting of the status quo narrative around them. I told that story about myself once, and I realised how much value I'd risk letting go of if I let that narrative take hold. I wanted to remain optimistic and hopeful. I wanted to be enthusiastic. I wanted to influence others to feel the same, so together we could achieve whatever we set our minds to. There's no question that those traits have been dampened in me over time, but how much dampening is acceptable to me is another question that we all need to answer for ourselves. What saddens me most is how much skepticism still damages leadership today. Leaders sharing their lack of trust in a whole team because of the slight risk of one person taking advantage is a regular conversation for me, and it's shocking to see how much faith we've lost in people. We're surrounded by so much negativity in the world. Almost every news story is written about disasters, horrific incidents, or headlines designed to provoke emotions and judgment against each other. Our public leaders are so often seen to be making decisions based not on what's best for the people they serve, but for themselves. And when we do have leaders trying to do what's best for those they serve, we throw the book at them, convinced they can't possibly have any good in them, any real emotions about what's going on in their own lives, or any feeling about the weight of the decisions they hold. The same happens in the private sector repeatedly, and perpetuating all that in the background is leaders telling other leaders there's always something they've missed or could have done better, with barely any recognition of all the qualities and achievements they possess, driving the feeling that nothing else is ever good enough. They will never be good enough, isolating leaders into believing they can't be their whole self or talk to anyone about their concerns or ideas, which constantly suppresses all that optimism, hope, and faith in people, without which we can't succeed. The worst part of it all, our brains are designed to protect us, so the more this happens, the bigger the wall we build around ourselves, and eventually no one is able to see all the very qualities we need more of. Why am I telling you all this? Because whether you will be the person who finally shows who you are through the hard lessons you've learned about how not to be, or whether you've remained the optimistic, enthusiastic, and hopeful person you've known you are all along, make the choice to keep being you. Keep that faith in humanity, kindness, and the potential for greatness in everyone around you. Because while you continue to put in the effort to motivate, inspire, and build up everyone around you, they're learning that letting their good shine through is far more important than a constant focus on everything they believe is somehow wrong about them. It's also the very thing that builds cultures. We don't define purpose, values, and behaviours by what we claim to be bad or incapable of. We don't succeed through a lack of trust in each other or a refusal to learn. It's our strengths, our kindness, our respectful honesty, because brutal honesty never served anyone, and our desire to grow that defines the culture we surround ourselves with. So tell people what you see in them. Show them you believe in them. Support them to identify barriers and how to overcome them, and trust that they will learn and grow. The most relatable message I took from that talk with Jacinda was never to let anyone paint your optimism and hope as naivety. They are real and valid emotions that will drive your purpose and direction and allow you to serve those around you to the very best of your ability and do what's best for all. So be the optimism, enthusiasm, and hope that we need so much more of in this world. Retain your faith in people. Without that, without you, we're lost. Who you are matters greatly. I cannot even begin to list the volume of people I personally know that fell into accidental leadership. You know the story. You never intended to be where you are, you just spent some time in a company, got promoted after a while, and then kept getting promoted, receiving more responsibility, supporting others in their development, and before you knew it, you were years, sometimes decades, into a role you never intended to do, and probably didn't think you were right for in the first place. That's the same impression Jacinda had of herself. She wasn't a leader in her own mind. She was a crier, a worrier, and a hugger. Surely that didn't make a good leader, right? One of her biggest blockers as to why she might not be right for leadership was her empathy, but she later learned this was the very reason she was able to be useful, and that empathy is only empathy when it leads to a clear outcome. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes isn't enough. It's what you do with that understanding next that matters. I am a highly empathetic person, to the point that life has become overwhelming for me at times. Feeling so deeply the emotions and experiences of others can really affect you, and without the tools and strategies to manage that, it leaves little room for you to deal with your own emotions and experiences. I personally learned through some very difficult experiences that the best thing you can do is channel all that emotion and feeling into action. So when Jacinda stated that empathy is only empathy if it leads to a clear response or outcome, I immediately understood just how right she was. This is how we learn to do what's best for the people we serve. If you're really listening to understand, if you're sitting in the mud with them until they're ready to tell you, and if you're hearing what they want and need to feel supported, validated, and valued, you'll find you can always do something to make their experience better. And the best way to do that is to do everything in your power to make that happen. Waiting for others to act is a common behaviour. We're all under the assumption that so much is out of our control and that a higher power will have to do it for us. But if that renders us powerless, and we resign ourselves to that concept, we are no use to the people we serve at all. At which point, should we really be the leader? There is always something you can do, some part of what your follower needs that you can act on for a clear outcome that makes their experience better. But the next step is even more crucial, which is becoming a great follower. The people above you that you've been waiting for to act need your followership, and a big part of that is you sharing what you've done and what you need them to do for your followers with a firm why attached. I've spoken several times about Joanna Rawbone's reference to emotional literacy. This is a key point where that language will really help you. When you can clearly articulate somebody else's experience and emotional response, you're far better equipped to voice their why, as well as the actions they need from you and your leaders and the impact those actions will have. But as well as that, the people you're serving see you acting, see you achieving outcomes, see you using your empathy as the motivation behind it all, and you're visibly purposeful, with a clear direction supported by values and that optimism and hope that things can and will be better. Most importantly, they see your recognition of their humanity. If you've listened to this podcast for more than this episode, you'll already know I'm a highly driven people-first leader, because at the heart of every organisation is a group of human beings doing it all for you, making your vision come to life. And as I said at the beginning, we're all interdependent. Forget the job titles. When one of us loses, eventually we all lose. So act on everything you can, then act on your followership, be the messenger of what's needed and why, so we can all reach our definition of success together. I mentioned earlier that my own enthusiasm, optimism and hope has no doubt been dampened over time, and Jacinda was able to highlight for me the very reason why that happened when she stated that she is somewhat thin-skinned and that she doesn't want a thicker skin, because that would mean losing her empathy. And I realised how right she was. Sometimes leadership will hurt a little, and that's a better scenario than if it doesn't hurt at all. When experiences make us feel, make us think, make us understand, we are far better at our job, because we remain in service to others, and we know why. I did get a much thicker skin than I'd bargained for, so now on reflection I understand why there were times where I went off track and decided it was easier to tell than ask, easier to dictate than motivate, and easier to indoctrinate than inspire. But those times never felt right, aligned, or in service to others, which is why I always came back. And now I know it's okay to be optimistic, hopeful, empathetic, and to have faith in people. It's not naivety at all. It's how we create a better experience for us all. And critically, is the driver behind impactful and lasting change quickly. The hardest part of that entire talk to listen to was when Jacinda spoke about the 15th of March attacks, which I remember very clearly watching on the news in complete shock. But while it was the hardest part of the talk to listen to, it was also the most inspiring, because what happened afterwards was incredible. With a combination of leadership, compassion, empathy, and listening, the entire New Zealand population rallied around Christchurch without question, supporting them to recover from this devastating tragedy. But more importantly, Parliament united. Less than a week later, the sale of semi-automatic weapons used to carry out the attacks in Christchurch were banned across New Zealand. And just days later, major changes were announced to the laws around possession and use of those weapons. Of 120 MPs, 119 voted in favour of those changes, and it was done within a matter of weeks. I've spoken before about how crisis often drives us to change, and that we don't always see that change happen quick enough. But in this case it happened not only fast, but very intentionally. Of course, most of us are not dealing with this level of crisis, and it doesn't always need to be crisis that drives action. When we have empathy, when we have optimism, when we have hope, and when we lead with compassion and understanding and listening, purposeful change can happen if we choose to make it happen quickly. Those very qualities that people have been telling you all your life are not suited for leadership are the very qualities that connect us, are the very qualities that can unite us, and often are uniting us, even when we seem so divided. So if you're that leader that worries, cries, hugs a lot, feels a lot, and doubts yourself, know that's totally okay. In fact, it's the required component of your leadership and the reason your team will trust you, respect you, and follow you. You might not think that you're making that much of a difference by showing these qualities and skills, but it only takes a drop to start a ripple effect. You won't always see the ripple reach the shore, but remember it will get there, and it starts with you. So bring your empathy, optimism and hope to the front, and use it as the very reason you are right for leadership. Because we can do this differently. We need you to show us how. Until next time, everyone.